So you want to make Sims like life simulator game? No problem. We will be using Unity 2021 LTS version, the 3D URP preset, but I will try to keep it workable in any graphical environment, so it should work in any other version of Unity too. So after you choose the name of your project and place where it will be saved, we can begin. Create our first scene called Essential. This scene will contain all the essential components for the gameplay of our game. Now create a plane to serve as our floor. Okay, make few cubes to serve as walls and obstacles. This is just a placeholder. We will replace it with a better graphics later. Make a bright red material so we can differentiate test walls from our floor. Good. For our characters, I have downloaded idle animation and movement animation from Mixamo. They are available for free, and we will use Mixamo and other 3D models in this tutorial. I have downloaded idle and walk animation with settings you can see on your screen. Make sure for walk animation you set it to be in place. Place an idle character into the scene. Let's make a rudimental animator controller, where we will animate character movement. Add idle and movement animation to the animator controller. Set that we have a parameter for movement, so when this parameter is true, it means we are moving and need to animate a movement notion. Set the animation to be loopable. And now you have an idle animation for the character. Good, this object will represent just a model of the character. It's a graphical representation of the character on the scene. Create an empty object called character. Add capsule collider and rigid body to make your character have a physical collider on the scene. Then create and add a new component called character. For now, leave it empty. This component will be carrying the character data, like his stats. Okay, this new object will represent physical presence of your character on the scene and his characteristics, while model object is just that, visual representation of your character. So parent the model of the character to the character object. Let's make the character be able to move around. To the character, add NavMesh Agent component. This is a Unity-made pathfinding system, and we need to bake the environment so it can function. Select your floor and walls, and in the navigation menu, set them as being navigation static, and bake them. You should see something like this happening. The highlighted areas are the areas your character can move through. Good. Now we want to tell our character where we want him to go. So select main camera and create another new script called moveCharacterInput. Create serialized field called agent of type NavMesh Agent. To be able to do this, you need to import a Unity Engine AI. So now, if we look into the editor, if our character have NavMesh Agent, we will be able to reference him. As a character, we are commanding to move around, like this. Inside the update callback, update is fired up every frame. It's a perfect place to catch the input from the player. Check if we press right mouse button. The 0 is left mouse button and 1 is right mouse button. If we pressed right mouse button, we need to determine the position where our character is supposed to move towards. To do this, we need to shoot the ray from our mouse, and the position this ray intersects with our terrain is the position our character needs to reach. So shoot the ray from our main camera. And set destination for our NavMesh agent to be the point of intersection. If you're experiencing any issues related to the camera, check if you have camera being marked as main camera with a tag. Good. As you can see, our character can move around. Let's change something. Let's make a reference to the camera we are using, instead of using camera.mainCamera. This will allow us to specify which camera to use for movement input. Will be useful later on in the tutorial. Our character move, but are not animated in any way. He just slides around. Let's change this. Select character object and create an add animate character component. Inside, create serialized field for animator to animate our character based on the fact does our NavMesh agent is going places. To do this, we want to cache the reference to the NavMesh agent. but it's going to take forever to keep referencing things manually into serialized field all the time, and we know for the fact that our animate character is attached to the same object as NavMesh agent, which guide our character. So instead of using serialized field to reference component, we will cache by getting it from the same object we attached to. If you type get component like this, it will try to get component of the same object as this component is attached to. Reference the animator. In the update, call setPool moving parameter make doubly sure it's the same name as your parameter in the animator controller. And now we check the velocity of the agent, meaning if it is higher than 0, it means our character is moving somewhere, and we need to animate the movement. Select transition between walking and idle and uncheck the has exit time. Look at this. Good. But if we want to be able to control multiple characters, we want to make it possible to switch between those characters. So we want to make it possible to select a different character by clicking on him. Before we implement this, let's prefab our current character, so we can easily replicate character on the scene. Make two characters on the scene. Now open Move Input Script. In the update, if we press left mouse button, we will cast a ray. And check if this ray hits something. We check does this object we hit with the ray have enough mesh agent. If it does, we select this new NavMesh agent as the agent we are controlling over. Let's test this. But before we launch the game, because we are using NavMesh agent, we actually don't need rigid body for now. We will come back to this topic in episodes to come, so remove rigid body of the character prefab and double check your characters on the scene. Your character should not have a rigid body on the scene. Launch the game. Now if I click with left mouse button, I will select new character I'm pointing at with my mouse, and with right mouse button I move him around. Good. But let's go back to the input script again. We have a problem here of repeating ourselves. When you code the game, you should avoid repeating code as much as possible. You should avoid having the code which do exactly the same thing as much as possible. Here we have an array used in both left and right mouse button input. we can simply keep casting it every frame, and we will utilize this array later on for feedback to player, so it's okay to be casted every frame. Let's test this. Good. This episode is brought to you by generous support of people on Patreon and viewers like you. Please click on the like button if you like the tutorial, and if you have any questions, leave a comment. If you want to support further, you can join my Patreon and be featured like those cool people you see on the screen right now. Back to the usual program. Let's reflect which character is selected, and to do this, we need to introduce a name to the character. In the character class, define a new public string variable name. Now in the Unity, you can specify name of the character. Let's show the name of the selected character on the screen. To do this, we will have to create a text object on the screen. When you try to create a text object of TextMesh Pro, you will most likely see this screen. This is because before using TextMesh Pro objects, you have to import all related to them libraries and assets. So click Import TMP Essentials. Do not import examples and extras, you don't need them. So now we have a text object on the screen. Move it to be at the left bottom corner. Anchor it to the bottom left corner by pressing this. Good. Now in Move Character Input, create reference to the character name TextMesh object. And when we reselect our character, we will change the shown text to the name of the character, which we can do by getting the character component of the newly selected agent. This will work because we're trying to get the character component of the same object as to which selected agent is attached to. Assign reference. Just to be clear, this is not how it's supposed to be done. We're doing this just as demonstration. You remember I mentioned that our essential scene will only contain an essential components for the gameplay, a component essential for our game to function. That includes camera or game manager, but not our environment, because environment changes based on the scene you are exploring, based on the state of the game, etc, etc. So we need to separate them into two scenes, an essential scene and stage scene. Create new scene. Use an empty preset and load it additively. Now you will see two scenes loaded at the same time. Move environment and characters into the stage scene. If your scene looks like this, it means you only have stage scene loaded. Load an essential scene and then drag and drop stage scene into hierarchy. When you use this system, you must make sure your essential scene is an active scene. Or put it even simpler, main scene. This is scene which calls the shots and the boss around. Your active scene out of all loaded scenes are the one with the bold name. Make sure you set the correct scene to be active. Essential scene must be active before you launch the game. If your essential scene is not active, click right mouse button and select Set Active. Everything should function. This is it for this episode. Special thank you to TheSaltHashDo and Stormbreaker 9000 for their generous support. With best regards, see you in the next episode.